In this video, we're doing an unboxing of books that I resubmitted to CGC after being rejected for pre-screen the first time. And resubmitting the books to CGC can be a colossal waste of time and money. And I've learned a few things over the years, some valuable lessons that I wanted to share with you today so that you don't make the same mistakes I did. Stay tuned.
Bry's Comics.
Stay tuned to the end of the video for my top 2 tips for resubmitting books to CGC. But before we get into the actual unboxing and take a closer look at the actual books, I wanted to discuss a couple of terms and some financial reasons and situations for when this would and wouldn't make sense. So pre-screen is a term when you submit at least 25 books in the same tier to CGC, you can set a pre-screen grade on them, which means that if it hits this grade, encapsulate it. If it doesn't hit this grade, send it back to me raw, and they charge you an $8 rejection fee. And you also have the shipping cost both ways. You have to ship the book to CGC, they have to ship the book back to you. So it's an $8 rejection fee, and it's roughly about $5 total for the whole shipping it to them and them shipping the slab back to you, about $5 per book. That's just a rough number, but it's a good way to gauge, the cost. And that's if you have at least a 25 book pre-screen. The cost kind of goes down if you have 50, 75, 100. The more books you have, the lower your shipping cost is overall. The all-in cost roughly to have a book pre-screened and rejected is about $13. So depending on the value of the book raw and the value of the book graded, it can make a lot of sense to resubmit the book, and it can also not make a lot of sense to resubmit the books if you're just racking up $13 rejection fees time and time again, and you're just spinning your wheels. So this is something that you get better at with time. As you submit more and more and you start to see what is accepted, what isn't accepted, you get a better idea of what is worth resubmitting and what isn't. I will tell you that sometimes I have submitted books to CGC where an entire submission or close to an entire submission is rejected, and I've turned around and resubmitted that exact same thing without even pressing them, and the vast majority, like 90%, come back 9.8s. Sometimes you just get a submission back and you're scratching your head going, why did so many of these get rejected? And sometimes they do need an additional press, and sometimes they're just fine the way they are, and you can resubmit it and get the 9.8. It really just comes down to the actual submission and the actual books. It's so nuanced. It's impossible to make a video and say, this is why it happens here and this is why it happens here. Grading is subjective, and the condition of books can vary vastly. So it's impossible to make an accurate video about that, but you will get comfortable with it over time, and you'll be able to notice sometimes you get a submission back and you're like, man, I got screwed. These are harsh grades and I should just try again, which is why pre-screen can be so important. In fact, one of the books in this submission, the Marvel Guide to Collecting Comics, I didn't even repress it. They rejected it the first time. I looked at it. It's absolutely perfect. There's nothing that can be pressed. There's nothing that can be improved. There's no reason it's not a 9.8. So I resubmitted it as is, and it got the 9.8. It's just the nature of the game that we play. Grading is subjective, and it's really something that can only be honed in with time. If you stick around this channel, we do examples, and I'll show you examples in this video, so you'll pick up some tips along there, but there is no substitute for experience. With that said, let's go over to the shop and take a look at these books. All of these books here are part of a submission that I recently had, but all of these books had been submitted at least one other time. I guess I gloved up a little preemptively because I want to look at the rejects again and see why they were rejected. But this one here is a perfect example of when resubmitting works out, and it absolutely pays off. So this is like a $300 or $400 book. I'll put up on the screen. I can't remember offhand how much it's worth, but it's the first appearance of Spider-Man 2099 in preview, and it's Marvel Age number 114, and it's a book that just would probably get me like $10 or $15 on Whatnot. If I brought this to Whatnot, a $1 start, people just would not go crazy for it. It's like a lesser known key, and so once you have it actually slabbed, graded in the 9.8, now it's something special, and now you can throw it on eBay or some of the bigger places where there's an actual collector looking for this, and you can fetch that high price of $300 or $400. So this is a perfect example of when it's worth it to resubmit if there's even a chance that it could get get the 9.8, because just having the rejection fee of $8 versus that added profit of getting 300 or 400 out of it. We always do a monthly giveaway on this channel. Subscribe, comment, and like for your chance to win this awesome slab. This book was rejected the first time. Marvel Comics Presents #1. It's just a killer Wolverine cover, and I gotta say that there is something special about pulling a book raw out of a collection, especially from this era, from the 80s or before, and getting the 9.8. It adds something to it. It just feels like such a win, because as you'll see with these books here, even the tiniest little defect holds it back from the 9.8. So it's truly way more special to find it raw, press it yourself, get it graded, and get the 9.8 versus just buying it in 9.8. That's why I highly recommend for anyone that's serious about collecting comics to invest in a press, learn how to do it, practice, and experience this joy of turning, you know, a backbin dollar fine into an absolute gem. So this one was definitely worth it just because of the cool cover. I don't think it's a super high value book. Check out that awesome Man-Thing cover on the back. But just for the win of getting it in a 9.8, I think it still makes sense financially too. This book is an absolute win. This is the Marvel Guide to Collecting Comics, no number, from 1982. I did a whole video on this, reading this book, actually reading it, and it has, you know, speculation and collecting advice. It was really more speculative advice than collecting advice. But I did a whole video about it. I'll put a link in the description, and I thought that it would be such a cool way to cap off that video, is to take this, you know, otherwise dollar bin back find, and, you know, make this video about it, about collecting comics, talk about speculation and how it was going in the 80s and how they thought certain books would pop off and other books wouldn't, and this one absolutely was not one that they would think would pop off. And then to get it graded in the 9.8 and it's worth like over $100, I just think it's such a cool story and such a cool piece of comic book history. Use code COLLECT10 for 10% off all in-stock items at brycecomics.com. That code is always active. While you're there, sign up for the newsletter and you're entered to win a free slab. This is another perfect example of when it makes a lot of sense to resubmit, even if there's just the slightest chance of getting the 9.8. Mighty Avengers #3. This is the La Roca variant cover that was a limited edition, only distributed in certain areas, with the M&M homage cover, a highly collectible variant that's hard to find. I think it's a $300 or $400 book, and this one was rejected twice. Actually, I sent this in twice and it was rejected twice, and I found out why. It was just like a stubborn crease or something right here, almost like a stacking bend that went the length of the book. We found it and pressed it out, and then it got rejected again, and then we tried one more time. So if you add up the numbers on that, you know, $8 per rejection fee, $5 for shipping both ways, I mean, you're in it like $26 to have it resubmitted and rejected twice, and then to finally get it in the 9.8, now it's worth $300 or $400. And this book on, you know, Whatnot, I would probably get like $50, $60 for it, maybe up to like $100 if somebody was in the room that was actually looking for it, but people just aren't going to shell out those kind of numbers unless it's actually graded in the 9.8. So another perfect example of when it makes sense. And here's another example, awesome spec book too, by the way. First battle between Wolverine and Punisher, I believe. Awesome cover to boot, and just one, the same story as the first book, just an awesome win to find this in a back bin and to get it graded 9.8. Rejected the first time, pressed and cleaned it, submitted it again, and got the 9.8. So now let's take a look at these books that were actually rejected. This book, I think I did submit 2 times, and so now I am going to call it on this one. I'm not going to resubmit it anymore. It was just another one of those that I thought would be so cool. A back bin find. There you can see a little something going on there. So this is really interesting. I don't remember this book, but this look appears to be like a printer's crease. Printer's crease is when the paper was creased before it was printed on, and that wouldn't affect the grade of the book, but there's also some like divoting and rivets that could have been what held it back on this time. If this was perfectly flat and it was just a printer's crease, it shouldn't affect the grade of the book. I've seen a printer's crease on a Silver Age book that went the entire length of the book, a gnarly printer's crease, and it still got a 9.8. So if we look on the back cover, I'll try to catch the light here to show you the back is really clean. And if we look at the spine of this book, The spine is really clean, no major spine ticks or anything along the spine. So I'm thinking that it must just be this little part right here, and I think if I were to flatten that out, I think it could get the 9.8, but at this point I've submitted it twice. I'm $26 into it. I'm just going to take the L on this one and call it. So this is another one I saw that was just an awesome find. Tough to find in 9.8. Not a lot of people you know, speculating on this book or getting it graded, but it did have some cool key significance. I'll put it up on the screen. I can't remember what it is. And I thought it was worth a shot. And look at this awesome back cover. Just such cool art back then. And the reason that I only submitted this once and it got rejected because of this spine tick right here. And I knew about that spine tick, and I thought there's still a chance that it could get a 9.8. That's absolutely like the borderline right there, but I have plenty of 9.8s that have a spine tick like that where the book is otherwise perfect and it's allowed. So I thought it was worth a shot, but it was only worth one shot for me, so I'll definitely call it on that one and not resubmit this one. Follow me over on Instagram and Whatnot. Instagram for trades, for grails, and fresh content over there, and Whatnot for live comic book auctions every single week. Link down in the description for $15 towards your first purchase. Daredevil 232, awesome back cover there, and I can see why this book was rejected. If you look at the spine of this book, there's just a couple spine ticks, one there, one there, one there. So this book is a 9.6 all day. I can't remember if we knew about those spine ticks and thought we'd just give it a shot. That's likely, or possibly, you know, maybe they weren't there when we sent them in. I doubt it. I think it's probably a better chance that we knew about those and we're just going to give it a shot. Because they're on the back, they're slight, and it is a solid 9.6. So this one, Wonder Woman number 88, just some awesome Bolin cover art. You know, love it or hate it, it's definitely interesting take on Wonder Woman, and this one I thought had a solid shot at a 9.8, but I'm seeing now why it was rejected. It's on the back, but if you look on the front here, you can see the spine is really tight, no spine ticks, no finger bends. The back looking sharp, also no spine ticks on the back, just a really clean book. Maybe a tiny little non-color breaking crease there, but that wouldn't hold it from a 9.8. What held it back is this crease right here. So this must have just been something that we missed. I don't think we would have submitted that knowing that that was there. There's no shot at a 9.8 with a crease like that, but you know, you can't catch everything, and you know, it's only an $8 rejection fee. My top 2 tips for resubmitting books to CGC are this. Number 1, don't be blinded by desire. I've mentioned this in previous videos, and I will mention it again. It is such an important term that affects so many different aspects of collecting comics. Sometimes you can be blinded by desire when you're making a purchase and you think, oh man, that's a 6.0 and it's really expensive, but I'm sure it's a CPR candidate. I'll probably be able to get a 7.5. You might be blinded by desire in that situation and convincing yourself the book is something that it's not. Likewise, with submitting books to CGC, don't be blinded by desire and just ignore a blatant defect that will for sure withhold it from getting a 9.8. I know I've done it many times, and it was almost like I got to a point where a little switch went off, where a check in my spirit came and said, you know what, you're being blinded by desire. Yes, you really want the 9.8 for this, but this book isn't a 9.8. It's a 9.4 or 9.6 at best. So it's almost like a decision that you make to not be blinded by desire and to be able to recognize in yourself when you are being blinded by desire. The second tip is take your time, especially if you are submitting on a smaller scale. You know, if you only do a few submissions here or there, really take your time, examine these books, the front, the back, out of the bag, look for these defects, get familiar with what's allowed in a 9.8, what isn't allowed in a 9.8. I've done several videos about what's allowable in a 9.8, and really take your time to screen these books. And if there's something there that's going to hold it back from a 9.8, then don't do it unless it's borderline. And if it's borderline, only have a couple. You know, you don't want to submit 25 borderline books all at once. You know, submit 25, 9.8 pre-screens, and maybe 2 or 3 of them are borderline. The reason it's so important to do this, take an extra hour, take an extra 20 minutes, however long it takes, is there's a long process and a lot of energy and effort that goes into packing, shipping, sending them to CGC, the mental and emotional toll that it takes on you, waiting for them to come back, checking that submission tab on CGC's website so many times to see, just to find out that it's rejected for something that you should have just caught the first time. So tip number 2 is slow down, take your time. It sure beats the amount of time that it takes to wait for them to be submitted, rejected, and sent back. So if you take your time up front, it could save you a lot of heartache. That's it for this video, me talking about my experience with resubmitting books to CGC after they've already been rejected. I hope it was helpful to you. If it was, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, comment on this video, and like this video for your chance to win a CGC 9.8 really awesome slab. And if you head over to brycecomics.com and sign up for the newsletter over there, you're entered to win a free slab as well. Thank you as always for sticking with me to the end of the video. We'll catch you in the next one. Bye.
Bryce Comics.